Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure to introduce members in the gallery who are here today for the Tribute for Victory in Europe Day in the Battle of the Atlantic. They include veterans of the Second World War, Minoru Yatabe, Jerry Rosenberg, Fraser McKee, Jim Macaluso, Helen Kerr, Major General Fraser Holman from the Canadian Forces College, Lieutenant David DeVries, Commanding Officer of 32 Services Battalion, Chief Warrant Officer Mark Shannon, the Sergeant Major of 32 Brigade Group, Honorary Lieutenant Ken Lloyd from 32 Signal Regiment, Lieutenant from the Navy Doug Humphreys of HMCS York, Michael Burns, of course, CEO of Invictus Games, Brian Weaver has been acknowledged from the Royal Canadian Legion, and representatives are here today from the 7th Toronto Regiment, Toronto Scottish Regiment, Royal Canadian Air Cadets, the Coast Guard Auxiliary, the Naval Association of Canada Toronto Branch, the Royal Canadian Military Institute, St. John Ambulance, and the Commissionaires. Thank you for being at Queen's Park today for this tribute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe you will find we have unanimous consent to pay tribute to the veterans who participated in the Battle of the Atlantic and the liberation of Europe, with a representative of each caucus speaking for up to 5 minutes.
The member from Simcoe Grey is seeking unanimous consent to pay tribute. Do we agree? Agreed.
Thank you, Speaker. And, on behalf of the official opposition and the entire PC caucus, we are humbled to pay tribute to Canadians who fought and died in defense of liberty in the Battle of the Atlantic and in every theatre of battle to ensure victory in Europe during the Second World War. Over 2,000 courageous members of the Royal Canadian Navy gave up their lives during the Battle of the Atlantic. This was the longest battle of World War II. Also claimed the lives of over 700 members of the Royal Canadian Air Force. For 6 long and arduous years in facing German ships, U-boats, the weighty responsibility of protecting vital Allied service lines increasingly fell on Canadian shoulders. Without Canadian sacrifice in the defense of those supply lines and the transportation of precious cargo, also by the Canadian Merchant Navy, victory in Europe may not have been ours. Canada's invaluable contribution to the war effort in the Battle of the Atlantic saw the successful completion of more than 25,000 merchant voyages from North America to British ports under our escort, with 165 million tons of cargo delivered. I'm very pleased my colleague, MPP for Simcoe Grey, will be introducing later today the Merchant Navy Veterans Act to honour the work of merchant mariners during World War II. Speaker, our Navy began with only 13 vessels, 3,500 servicemen, and by the end of the war, our capacity had grown to 375 fighting ships, more than 110,000 sailors and officers, including 6,500 women. Such was Canada's answer to the call of duty in the defence of our freedom and our friends and our values. All told, the staggering Canadian cost of defending liberty in Europe and the Asia-Pacific theatre meant that more than 42,000 Canadian defenders of freedom would not return home. Speaker, I grew up on war stories. My father's war stories, Sub-Lieutenant Harry B. Barrett. He manned the 4-gun on board HMSC Assiniboine, a destroyer that was called on to engage and ram enemy submarines on more than one occasion. He and his mates spent years on convoy duty, young men in the dark, in the wet, and in the cold, and it would be understatement to say that the weather could be rough on the North Atlantic. My father also survived the tragedy of the Halifax fire, returning to haul out hundreds of dead, including his friend Bob Presnell. I grew up on my father's war stories. He wrote a book about it, and then a few months ago, my father crossed the bar at age 94. So many tales of heroism that continue to inspire our admiration, countless untold stories of bravery of our sailors our airmen, our soldiers. We're privileged to have some of those fine people here today. Commander Fraser McKee joined in 1943, completing the basic training at HMCS Prevost in London before serving on board HMCS Vision and HMCS Wallenberg. Lance Corporal James McCall also served the Toronto Scottish Regiment, landed in Normandy, July 1944, Company 3 Platoon, liberating Mapelle in the Netherlands. First Lieutenant Helen Kerr served as a nurse at Dieppe. Sergeant Minoru Yatabe served the Intelligence Corps. Jerry Rosenberg is here, served on convoy duties, the corvettes, as I understand. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for your bravery, your sacrifice during those years. You have honored the service and memory of your brothers in arms with your presence here today. And for all that you have done, a grateful nation is forever in your debt. So thank you to your families. Thank you to those who proudly wear the uniform today, and thank you all who sacrificed so much, not only the Battle of the Atlantic, but in battles that ensured victory in Europe. It's something we will never forget.
I thank all members for their very thoughtful comments and their powerful words to pay tribute to these great people. Heroes indeed. A personal thank you. This place is here because of you, and we thank you for that.